The C5 Harmonic Balancer, with the exception perhaps of the oil pressure sending unit, this very well could be the least reliable stock GM part on your Corvette. Now, I've replaced a few harmonic balancers on C5 Corvettes, and in my opinion, it's not that bad of a job so long as you go into it prepared and with the understanding that it's going to take a pretty long time. I say a pretty long time because that depends on how mechanically inclined you are, how familiar you are with your C5 Corvette, and of course, how quickly you work. Now, I've already done a couple of videos on harmonic balancers on the channel. The first one was a super quick, easy way that anybody can do to diagnose whether or not your harmonic balancer is bad or not. The second video is a complete A through Z replacement of a harmonic balancer, and it even included pinning the harmonic balancer to the crank, and I'll be sure to leave links to both videos in the description directly below. So in this video, we're going to go through the specialty tools that you will need to complete this job, but don't worry, the list isn't that long, and we're going to go through all of those tools next.
Toys for life.
Let's take a step back and take a quick peek at what happens when a harmonic balancer fails. Now, this balancer here has not failed. It just happens to be the balancer that was on my C5 when I added the supercharger to it 4 years ago. And when you supercharge a C5, you generally want to make sure that you pin the harmonic balancer to the crankshaft by drilling a hole and inserting a pin in there because of the extra strain that that belt puts on this balancer assembly. And for some reason, GM engineers decided that for naturally aspirated installations, a keyway is not required. So there is no keyway from the factory. The harmonic balancer consists of two parts. You've got the inner hub and you've got this outer ring, and in between there's a thin layer of rubber that connects the two. So it's relatively simple with just the inner hub and the outer ring, and what that does is when the crankshaft is turning on a V8, every quarter turn there's a firing pulse from a cylinder exploding and beginning the power stroke. And that creates vibration in the crankshaft, and this dampens it by allowing this to kind of flex a little bit between the outer ring and the hub. So this is absolutely a mechanical part, and that rubber elastomer between the outer ring and the hub can fail. And when that happens, it generally starts to squeak and make noises. Maybe you'll throw a belt, or the outer ring can slide backwards and grind a hole in your timing cover, which is bad.
I think my harmonic balancer is bad.
Or if for some reason it slides forward, all of a sudden you've got a pretty big projectile under your hood. All right, with all of those pleasant scenarios out of the way, let's talk about the specialty tools you would need to replace your harmonic balancer that go beyond just your basic sockets, wrenches, and screwdrivers. First thing you're going to need is a quality jack and an even better set of jack stands to get the C5 as high up as safely possible. If you need any help or ideas for this, I'll include a video link in the description below. First tool you're going to need is a hockey stick or similar object and a bungee cord. This step cannot be overstated. You need to rig this up so that later on when you remove the steering rack, there's no way you, your buddy, your kid, or anybody else for that matter can turn the steering wheel. Because if that happens when the steering rack is out, it can wreck your steering position sensor, and you don't want that to happen. All right, moving along, you're at the point where you're removing the lines from the steering rack. And this is kind of tricky to get in there, but you're going to want to make sure that you have an 18mm line wrench and then also an 18mm stubby to get these lines broken loose so that you can remove them without stripping them. Fast forward, and before you know it, you're at the point where it's time to remove the harmonic balancer bolt, and that is a 24mm, by the way. And by far the easiest way to remove that bolt is to use either an electric or an air-powered impact gun, but just be sure you've got a decent one with plenty of torque. Now, if you don't have access to an impact gun, you can use one of these cheap $15 flywheel holders from Amazon, but know that you have to remove the starter first, which is kind of a pain in the ass, especially if you've got headers. As for me, I've got a strong preference. I prefer using this LS Harmonic Balancer holder from Summit Racing. I've used this one several times over the last 4 years, and every time it's worked like a charm. Take a look. Here's a close-up of the Summit LS Harmonic Balancer holder tool. It's got these 3 little legs that engage into the spokes on the LS Harmonic Balancer, and then you insert a short breaker bar like this one into this square right here, and then this rests against your frame rail, which holds the balancer while you remove it. Now, if you've never removed an LS Harmonic Balancer before, you might be thinking, I'm making a big deal out of this, and I am. This bolt is torqued down to like 250 pound-feet of torque, and it's a serious effort to hold on to that harmonic balancer while you're removing the bolt, so make sure you've got the right tools on hand when you're doing this, or you're gonna be stuck in the mud. All right, so like I showed you, if you go ahead and get this tool, when you remove that bolt, you're gonna need 2 breaker bars. The shorter one to go against the frame rail and support it, and then a longer one to help remove that bolt. And so that you know, here's the lengths of the breaker bars that I use. So now that you have your harmonic balancer bolt out, it's time to remove the balancer from the crankshaft, and for that, you need a quality harmonic balancer puller. The special balancer tool is needed because the harmonic balancer has what's known as an interference fit with the crankshaft, which is just a fancy way of saying it's pressed on there pretty damn tight. I've had great luck with this OTC puller, and I can say from experience that it works flawlessly, and it comes at a good price. The puller itself is pretty self-explanatory. It just uses those 3 little jaws to grab onto the harmonic balancer. The puller also comes with 4 of these different length rods that are inserted into the hole in the crankshaft where the bolt came out, so that it presses deep into the crankshaft and doesn't damage the threads while you're pulling the balancer off. Having the right tool like this one makes for a pretty easy job of removing your harmonic balancer. Resist the temptation to try to pry it off any other way, because if you mess up the threads in the end of your crankshaft, that's not good. The next step is to remove the front timing cover seal, and for that we're going to use this seal puller. The best part about this tool is it only costs about 13 bucks, and you can use it on all kinds of seals for all kinds of vehicles. So there's really no reason you shouldn't have one of these in your toolbox. And of course, now you've got to install the new seal, and for that, I typically just use one of the sockets that I've accumulated throughout the years. Just make sure that it fits the seal properly and that it allows for pressure on the outside edge of the seal all the way around so that you don't damage it. And in case you're wondering, this socket here is used for late 70s 3/4 ton pickup truck axle service. Why do I remember that? Anyway, the right thing to do would be to get yourself a seal installer kit because they don't cost much. And here's one from Amazon that looks like it would do the trick. And now it's finally time to install your new harmonic balancer, and for that you're going to need an LS Harmonic Balancer installer tool. Do not, I repeat, do not try to use your old harmonic balancer bolt to pull the harmonic balancer onto your crankshaft, and here's why. As you can see by looking at this used harmonic balancer bolt, even when the bolt has fully seated the harmonic balancer on the crankshaft, it's only using about 1 inch of the threads. If you try to use this bolt to pull the harmonic balancer onto your crankshaft, you're likely going to tear the last few threads out of your crankshaft, and that would be a mistake that would really, really sting. Instead, be sure to use the proper tool, which is this LS Harmonic Balancer tool. The shaft itself screws all the way into the crankshaft. Well, then you turn on the nut while it slowly pushes a harmonic balancer onto your crank snout without the risk of damaging your threads. Here's a quick pro tip. When you're about ready to install this balancer, put this thing on a cookie sheet in your oven at about 160 degrees for a half of an hour.
Honey, I think the harmonic balancer is ready.
Then, using a quality infrared heat gun, make sure the hub center is actually about 160 degrees, because that will expand the center of this hub, making it easier to install. And finally, you're at the point of installing your new harmonic balancer bolt, and you're gonna need something to hold the balancer, so you get to use this thing twice, which is kind of like killing two birds with one stone. Now, depending on how many of these tools you already have, that might be a short list or a medium list, but don't worry, I'll include a link to each of these tools in the description below in case you need to purchase any. And finally, because I know people are gonna ask, what is the best harmonic balancer to go with? And the honest answer is, I really don't know, but I would say this. After a fair bit of research and even a call to A&A Corvette, I went with a Power Bond, which is a pretty inexpensive balancer for my C5. And like I said, it's been 4 years and I've got no complaints. Guys, if you found this video to be useful, do me a favor please and leave a thumbs up so that YouTube knows to share this video with the Corvette community. And as always, thanks for watching.